She drove 3 hours to celebrate her birthday and her friends turned her into their personal Uber driver. It is your birthday. You planned a whole trip. You drove 3 hours. And the very first thing your friends do when you arrive is look at you and say, "Congratulations, you are now our driver." Not a suggestion. Not a conversation. An appointment. Like you were hired staff who just happened to also be the birthday girl. And when you said no, they punished you for it. That right there tells you everything you need to know about what kind of friends these women actually are. But let us back up and go through this properly, because there are layers to this situation that deserve to be fully examined. So picture this. You are 30 years old. You organized, you planned, you got a babysitter so you could actually enjoy yourself for once. Think about what that took. The coordination alone, calling someone to watch your kid, packing your bag, mapping out the route, probably sending confirmations to the group chat that nobody else was managing, because that kind of behind-the-scenes labor almost always falls on one person. You drove 3 hours to Atlanta with your group of friends, 15 years of friendship between you all, which is a long time. Long enough that you would think these women know you, respect you, and genuinely want you to have a good birthday. You probably walked into that hotel lobby feeling light. Relieved, maybe. The kind of feeling you get when you have finally crossed the threshold from all the preparation into the actual thing you were preparing for. You get to the hotel, everyone settles in, bags hit the floor, shoes come off, the energy of arrival fills the room. And then it happens. They look around the group and decide, without asking, without discussing, that you are going to be the designated driver for the entire trip. Not just for one outing. For the whole thing. 6 women in Atlanta and their solution is to make the birthday girl their personal chauffeur. And here is the part that really matters. It was not because your car was the biggest, or because you were the only one sober, or because of some logistical reason that actually made sense. Nothing was wrong with any of their cars. Nobody had a medical condition that prevented them from driving. Nobody had a legal issue that kept them from getting behind the wheel. They simply did not want to drive. That was the whole reason. They did not want the mild inconvenience of navigating an unfamiliar city, of finding parking, of being the one responsible for getting everyone home safely. So they decided you would take it on instead. On your birthday. Without even asking. Without even a moment of hesitation. As if the idea that you might not want to spend your celebration ferrying people around had simply never occurred to them. You said no. Which was the completely reasonable, completely sane, completely obvious response to that situation. And I want to point out that saying no probably was not even easy. It never is, in a group setting, when you are the one pushing back against a thing everyone else seems to have already agreed on. There is always that moment of social vertigo, that split second where you wonder if you are the problem, if you are reading it wrong, if maybe you should just go along with it to avoid the awkwardness. But you did not. You told them you would be happy to take turns, which is how adults handle shared responsibilities. You were not refusing to participate. You were not trying to cause conflict or make the trip difficult. You were refusing to be exploited. You were offering a fair middle ground, a solution that accounted for everyone including yourself, which is exactly the kind of proposal a reasonable person makes. You were behaving like someone who values both herself and her friendships at the same time. And somehow, those two things got treated as if they were the same. Then the silent treatment started. They ignored your calls. They ignored your texts. The next morning, when you were just trying to figure out what time everyone was leaving the hotel, when you sent what was probably a completely normal message that any reasonable person would send, you got crickets. Silence. The specific kind of silence that is not accidental, not the result of people being busy or distracted, but the deliberate, coordinated kind that requires multiple people to all agree to ignore the same person at the same time. From women you have known for 15 years. Women who drove to this trip specifically to celebrate you. Women who had presumably sung happy birthday to you before, who had sat across tables from you during hard moments in your life, who knew your laugh and your history and the sound of your voice. And their response to you setting one single boundary was to freeze you out completely and act like you had done something unforgivable. Let us sit with that for a second. Because the silent treatment is not just rude. It is a tactic. It is designed to make you feel isolated, anxious, and desperate to fix a problem that you did not actually create. It is meant to trigger the part of you that has been conditioned, probably since childhood, to prioritize group harmony over your own comfort. They wanted you to feel bad enough to cave. They wanted the discomfort of being ignored to feel worse than the discomfort of spending your birthday driving 6 people around Atlanta. They were betting on the fact that you would rather swallow the unfairness than sit with the loneliness they were manufacturing around you. And if you had caved, they would have gotten exactly what they wanted, which was free transportation and a birthday girl too socially conditioned to say no. But you did not cave. And that is the part of this story that I genuinely respect. Because a lot of people would have. A lot of people would have felt the silence pressing in and decided that being right was not worth the cost of being excluded. You went and got your rental car on day 2. By yourself. And you went out and enjoyed Atlanta. You did exactly what you came there to do. You saw a new city, you had a good time, you made the most of a trip you had planned and paid for and arranged childcare for. I want you to really sit with the image of that, because it is actually kind of remarkable. You woke up on the second day of your birthday trip, having been iced out by your entire friend group, and instead of spiraling or sulking or spending the day in your hotel room feeling sorry for yourself, you got a car and went to explore the city alone. That takes a particular kind of self-possession that not everyone has. While they were catching Ubers to places and deliberately not including you, you were out living your actual birthday. Now, I want to talk about the audacity of the Uber detail for a moment. They took Ubers. Which means they had no problem spending money on transportation. They had no problem figuring out how to get around the city without a designated driver. The only issue, the only one, was that they wanted you to be that driver. So this was never a practical problem. Nobody was stranded. Nobody was unable to get where they needed to go. They found a solution within minutes of needing one, which tells you everything. That was never about logistics. That was about control. They wanted to use you, and when you would not let them, they found another solution in about 5 minutes and then had the nerve to still be upset with you about it. Which proves the whole thing was never a logistical problem. It was a power move. And then, to add one more layer of absurdity to this whole situation, you are apparently the one in the wrong. They came home from this trip acting like you were the problem. Like you ruined everything. Like you should have just sat in the hotel room and stewed in miserable silence while they punished you, rather than going out and enjoying your own birthday like a grown adult who knows her worth. Think about how much audacity that requires. To retaliate against someone for not doing what you wanted, and then also be angry that they found a way to be okay without you. They did not just want your compliance. They wanted your suffering. They wanted you to sit in that hotel room and feel the full weight of their disapproval, and the fact that you went out and had a good time anyway seems to have bothered them almost as much as the original refusal did. The reframing there is breathtaking if you stop to look at it. You set a fair limit. They chose to retaliate. You adapted and took care of yourself anyway. And somehow you are the villain of that story. This is exactly the kind of situation that reveals who people actually are under social pressure. 15 years of friendship, and the moment you said no to something unreasonable, the masks came off immediately. No grace, no conversation, no attempt to see your perspective or ask how you were feeling or even acknowledge that they had put you in an unfair position. No one in that group stopped and said, actually, hang on, this is supposed to be her trip. No one advocated for you. That is a separate thing worth sitting with, the silence of the ones who may have privately disagreed but said nothing, because going along was easier than speaking up. Just punishment. Just exclusion. Just a coordinated campaign to make you feel like the bad guy for not wanting to be their driver on your own birthday. And the speed of it. That is the part that should not be overlooked. There was no deliberation, no one in the group who pulled back and said, "Wait, this is her birthday, let us talk this through." It happened fast. Which means the impulse to punish was right there, sitting just below the surface, ready to go the moment it was needed. Your husband called it correctly. These women were never really your friends, not in the way that actually counts. A real friend, even if she was annoyed or inconvenienced, would not have ignored your calls the morning after. A real friend group would have talked it out, figured out a fair solution, and made sure the birthday girl was having a good time. That is what friendship looks like. What you got instead was mean girl behavior from women who are old enough to know better, women who have presumably had enough life experience to understand that silent treatment is not a conflict resolution strategy, it is a form of punishment. And choosing to use it on your friend during her birthday celebration is a choice that says something very specific about who you are. And I think the thing that stings the most about this is not the trip itself. It is the 15 years. Because you have to go back and look at that history now with different eyes, and that is a genuinely painful thing to have to do. You have to wonder how many times you accommodated them, how many times you went along with things that were not quite fair, how many times you were the one doing the extra organizing or making the extra effort or swallowing a complaint to keep the peace. Because people do not just become like this overnight. This behavior, this ease with using silence as a weapon, this comfort with punishing someone who declines to serve them, it was already in them. The trip just created a situation where they felt comfortable enough, or perhaps entitled enough, to finally show it openly. You said yourself that you thought fallouts on girls' trips were a TikTok thing. Something that happened to other people, in other friend groups, in situations that were somehow more dramatic or more dysfunctional than yours. You probably watched those videos with a kind of comfortable distance, maybe even a little bit of judgment, thinking that your friendships were different, that your people were more mature than that. That 15 years of history insulated you from that kind of petty group behavior. And that tells me that you are someone who generally gives her friends the benefit of the doubt. You are not the type to assume the worst or manufacture drama or walk into a situation looking for reasons to be offended. You are the type who goes in trusting, who extends good faith as a default, who assumes that the people she loves are operating from the same foundation of care and respect that she is. Which makes what they did to you even worse, because you genuinely went on that trip trusting these women with your birthday, with a rare day off, with your joy. You were not braced for it. You had no armor up. You walked in open, and that is exactly when it hurts the most. You deserved a better birthday. You deserved to walk into that hotel room and feel the warmth of people who were genuinely excited to be there for you. You deserved friends who would have laughed off the whole driving situation, maybe teased each other about it, pulled out their phones to look up a fair rotation schedule, and then moved on because the point of the trip was you, not who was sitting in the driver's seat. You deserved friends who would have split it fairly and then focused all of their energy on making sure you felt celebrated and seen and loved, the way you feel when you are with people who actually want you to have a good time and not just a convenient one. You deserve to be the undeniable priority on your own birthday trip, the person everyone was trying to make happy, the center of something warm and fun and genuinely affectionate, the kind of trip you would have looked back on for years. And instead you had to go celebrate yourself, by yourself, in a rental car, in a city you had never been to, because the people who were supposed to show up for you chose to sulk instead. The good news is that you did celebrate yourself. You did go out. You did have a good time. And you did not let them take that from you. That matters. Here is what makes this next story so quietly funny to me. 49 years of marriage. This man has had 49 years to learn that when his wife tells him something, he should probably listen. And he still did not. Married 49 years and he still tunes her out, then blames her for his own mistake. 10:05 p.m. Claude Respondio, she told him it was science fiction. She told him it was science fiction. She told him it was by the same author who wrote The Martian. She even mentioned that he had already seen and liked The Martian. And he still missed the movie because he assumed it was a chick flick and tuned her out entirely. After 49 years of marriage, this man filtered out his wife's voice so completely that he missed a film he would have genuinely enjoyed, and then somehow decided that was her fault. I genuinely cannot decide whether this is frustrating or hilarious. Maybe both. So let us walk through exactly what happened here, because the details are important. The book club was reading Project Hail Mary, which for anyone who does not know is a hard science fiction novel. We are talking astronauts, alien contact, interstellar survival. It is about as far from a romantic drama as you can possibly get. The kind of story where the tension comes from physics and ingenuity and the sheer improbability of two wildly different life forms figuring out how to communicate across the void of space. The book club decided to go see the film adaptation together, and they opened the invitation to spouses. She invited her husband and told him what it was. Told him it was science fiction. Told him it was the same author behind The Martian. She laid it out clearly, the way you would explain something to someone you have known for nearly half a century, with the casual confidence of a person who assumes they will be heard. And he sat there, heard some version of those words, and his brain processed them as, that sounds like something I would not care about, and moved on. He did not ask a follow-up question. He did not say he was unsure. He just quietly filed it under irrelevant and returned to whatever was occupying his attention instead. Now this is where it gets interesting. Because his explanation afterward was not that she was unclear. It was not that the information was confusing or hard to understand. He straight up told her he was not paying attention and assumed it would be a chick flick. He admitted that out loud. To her face. He sat across from the woman he has been married to for 49 years and said, essentially, I heard you speaking and chose to decide the content was not worth my focus before I even processed what you were saying. He admitted that he filtered her out, made a snap judgment based on essentially nothing, and then missed an event he would have wanted to attend. And his conclusion from all of that, the breathtaking part, was that she should have explained better. Let us just be clear about what he is actually saying. He is saying that because he chose not to listen, it is her job to make him listen. He is saying that her communication failed because it did not somehow override his decision to ignore it. He is saying that the solution to him not paying attention is for her to find a way to force his attention, rather than for him to, perhaps, pay attention. After 49 years of marriage. This is the standard he is applying. Not to himself. To her. And look, I want to be fair here, because 49 years is a long time and every long marriage develops its rhythms and its quirks. It is not surprising that after nearly 5 decades together, two people with very different interests have developed a kind of shorthand where one assumes and the other has learned that sometimes the assumption leads to regret. That is actually very human. Very real. You can almost picture how it happened gradually over the years, how her invitations to things outside his comfort zone became background noise he learned to gently dismiss without fully engaging, and how she may have learned to simply extend the invitation anyway and make peace with the outcome either way. That dynamic exists in long marriages all the time. But understanding it does not make him right about who is at fault here. She did what she was supposed to do. She extended the invitation. She gave him the relevant information. The author, the genre, the connection to a film he already liked and enjoyed. That is a solid pitch. That is genuinely enough for a reasonable adult to make an informed decision. If someone came to me and said, "Hey, there is a new movie by the author of The Martian, it is science fiction, do you want to come?" I would have everything I needed to say yes or no. I would not need a PowerPoint presentation. I would not need a second conversation. She gave him that. She handed him the information with a bow on it. He just did not receive it because he had already decided not to. Now here is the part of this story that I absolutely love. Her response to the whole situation. Because rather than getting into a prolonged argument about whose communication style is whose responsibility, a fight that could have lasted days and resolved nothing, she did something much more effective. She made sure he now knows exactly what the movie is about. She played him YouTube clips. She gave him the full picture of everything he missed, the plot, the alien, the moments that would have had him leaning forward in his seat in a dark theater surrounded by her book club friends. And yes, that spoils it a little. She knows that. She is, by her own description, exactly that kind of person. The kind of person who has learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is make the consequence of a bad decision impossible to ignore. And honestly, fair enough. Because what she is really doing is demonstrating the consequence of his own choice. You did not listen, you missed the film, and now here is what you chose to miss. That is not cruelty. That is clarity. There is a difference between being vindictive and making sure someone fully understands the result of their own decision, and what she is doing sits squarely in the second category. It is not a punishment. It is a receipt. She also said something at the end of this story that I think is genuinely wise and worth paying attention to. She said she can bring a horse to water but she cannot make it drink. And she has clearly applied that philosophy consistently throughout their marriage, which is probably a big part of why they are still together after 49 years. She is not trying to manage him or control him or force him to engage with things he does not want to engage with. She moves through their shared life with a kind of patient generosity, extending invitations and information and opportunity, and then she steps back and lets him decide. That takes a particular kind of emotional discipline that not everyone develops even after decades together. She invites, she informs, she gives him the opportunity, and then she lets him make his own choice. The problem is when he makes a bad choice and then blames the invitation instead of the chooser. This is one of those situations where the answer is genuinely obvious once you strip away the familiarity and comfort that long marriages can sometimes use to blur accountability. She told him. He did not listen. That is the whole story. Everything else is noise. Let us be honest about what the real tension in this story is, because it is not really about a movie. It is about a pattern. It is about a man who, in a marriage full of different interests and different tastes, has developed a habit of filtering out his wife's recommendations before he even fully receives them. You can almost feel what it must be like on her end, crafting a pitch she thinks will land, connecting the dots for him, mentioning The Martian specifically because she knows he loved it, and still watching it bounce off the wall of his assumptions completely unabsorbed. And then when that filter causes him to miss something he would have genuinely enjoyed, his instinct is not to examine the filter. It is to ask why she did not find a way around it. And that dynamic, small as it seems in this particular story, is actually worth paying attention to because it shows up in a lot of relationships and it quietly places an unfair burden on the person who is always doing the informing. He has other redeeming qualities, she says, and I believe her. 49 years does not happen without a lot of love and patience and genuine partnership. But on this specific question, on this specific situation, he is wrong. And being wrong after 49 years of marriage is not a tragedy. It is just Tuesday. The question is whether he can see it clearly enough to actually own it. She is not the bad guy here. She is the horse handler. She brought the horse to the water. The horse looked at the water, decided it was probably lemonade, walked away, and is now annoyed that no one warned him it was water. Drop a comment below and tell me which story hit harder for you, the birthday trip betrayal or the 49-year-old selective hearing situation. And if you made it this far, a like and subscribe would mean the world.